The marketer in me is freaked out about not having any metrics on the first email that goes out to all your prospects. I get it. But if you told me that I'd get 10% more replies by turning it off, I care more about getting more replies than finding out what that number is.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. It's a simple fact of cold email. If your message lands in the spam folder, ain't nobody gonna read it. Luckily, there are 9 little-known steps that anyone can follow to get their emails to safely land in the inbox every time. Follow along with this updated checklist episode as Jeremy and I show you the right way to set up a cold email campaign from scratch in 2019. Enjoy.
So today, Jack, got a little bit of a story. This morning, one prospect customer of QuickMail came to me and told me that they created a brand new email address on a brand new domain and started with their own automation software, and it was straight away rejected by Google. And so we jumped on a call, and I just basically walk him through all the steps that I would do in order to warm up the domain so they don't get rejected straight away as soon as they plug in automation or their automation software. And I figured out maybe that's a good idea to do a cast on that and let people know about what are the steps to do in 2019 to warm up your domain, because as you know, in 2017, you could just, it was kind of the Far West, jump in, buy your domain, off you go, right?
Yeah, much simpler times. And like this person just found out, if you just sort of go through the steps in the wrong order or the wrong way, nobody's going to see your cold emails, which is sort of a kiss of death, as we've talked about on the cast. So, okay, so basically we're going to review how to set up a brand new cold email account today, and maybe some more tips that listeners can use to make sure people see their emails.
Yeah, that's right. So how do you suggest we go about it? I got my list of steps to do.
Okay.
You probably got your points too.
I do.
How should we go forward?
Yeah, I like starting with purchasing a domain for 2 reasons. One, it just takes time from the payment of the domain to actually having that domain being linked to the DNS servers. So do this first, and usually it takes between 48 and 72 hours to actually have this domain get picked up so that you can link it to an email account. Is this like 1 or 3 days, more or less, about the timing?
Oh, but wait. Can we tell people why they need to create a new domain in the first place?
Yeah, so here's a quick story. I had a client, let's call him Tim, and Tim started using cold email with his company domain. His domain that's linked to the website and his, work email that he's been using for years. And one day he said, hey, I started this cold email thing, but now I emailed my colleague and he didn't get my message and he checked spam, and my message to my co-founder was in a spam box and no one's replying to my emails. What happened? Long story short, Tim had been using cold email incorrectly, and therefore his sender reputation went down the drain. And now there was a period of time that he couldn't even send an email to his co-founder without it getting flagged as spam, which is the last place you want to be, right? And if you follow our advice that we list in the podcast, you really don't have to worry about this. But things happen, and this is why it's always a good idea to hedge your bets and create a separate domain that's not connected to your actual company domain reputation as you start off with cold email. It's just best practice and, in my opinion, an essential of doing cold email.
Yeah, it's mandatory if you start on cold email for sure.
Yeah, don't be like Tim. Make sure all of your emails get delivered, and this way you have sort of an escape plan if all goes south.
Yeah, that's correct. On top of that, if people are wondering, should I go for a .net or .com, whatever?
Yeah.
I guess most of the time people will be fine with the current extension they already have, so they can just change the name of their domain. So if, for example, you have a .io kind of domain, then, get another .io with a slightly different name.
Yeah.
I guess that works fine. Some domains have more scrutiny than the others, like .com have their own special fresh list, which means if your domain is less than 30 days, is a little bit more spammy, those sort of things. But
yeah,
usually I go for .net. So I got actually two ones. I got my .io with a different name, and I got also a .net for just normal cold email stuff.
Yeah, and that's the second reason I like to get that out of the way, is because there's a little bit of a creative decision that needs to be made in purchasing a domain. Are you going to go with .net? I actually like .co's, but I'm not finding any like serious difference between that and .net. It just looks a little bit snappier. And before we move on from buying a domain, we need to talk about where you go to get this domain, because it used to matter more than it does today. So, for example, if you are setting up using G Suite, then you probably want to have registered your domain with a G Suite domain partner. That is, until recently, now Google has their own domain purchasing service. It's domains.google is the place you can go to register a domain using Google. And if you plan on using G Suite, using Google's domain registrar is probably the fastest and maybe easiest way you can go about buying that domain.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I'm not 100% sure on this one. Maybe I should do my homework. I'm sorry about that, guys. But I believe that the SPF is automatically configured when you actually go through Google automatically.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the DKIM, and those two things really have to be set up. So even if they are probably set up, it's good practice to check that your SPF and DKIM is set up. I know it's technical and people would love not to have to do that, but it's relevant. You have to do that, guys. Otherwise, you're going to end up in junk mail straight away.
Yeah, and I'll be the non-technical guy here. Don't worry, don't freak out. It really isn't that hard. If you Google setting up DKIM with G Suite or with Outlook, it actually is quite painless. You got to follow 10 steps, and that's basically it. But one thing to note here, I've been using GoDaddy. I stopped using them just because I don't find them to be very user-friendly, but they are a trusted partner with Google. So before, they would automatically set up SPF, and it just would link to the account faster. So using a partner with whatever engine you're using to send your emails is definitely a good idea. It just takes a little bit of the headache away.
Yeah, and one last thing as well you want to do is to install a redirection from your domain to your main domain. So if people want to check you out and then type the .co of Jack or the .net of Jeremy, then ideally, they get redirected to the proper domain so they can really check you out and then have an opportunity of interacting with your brand.
That way, if they paste in your email domain into a search bar, they're not going to get a 404 or some odd-looking website that's got nothing on it.
Yeah, it looks fishy otherwise.
Exactly. What's next? Now that we've just purchased our shiny new domain, now I think we have the big decision to make is who we're going to use for our inbox.
That's correct. And then you do have a lot of choices. Obviously, one of the most popular at the moment is G Suite. I suspect that's going to change in the future, but we'll cover that another day. Then you got Office 365 with Outlook. You could also go Fastmail, ProtonMail, or WorkMail. WorkMail is from Amazon.
It sounds like there's a few more options today than there was, let's say, in 2016 or earlier. Let's say I'm driving to the office and I'm currently thinking about setting up a cold email campaign. Do you have any sort of tips for if I'm considering different inboxes, like G Suite or Outlook, for example?
That's a good question. And I think we probably need a whole cast to answer these specific questions. You have a few arguments to weight. It could be resumed as simplicity versus future-proof versus flexibility or compatibility. So, that's not a problem with QuickMail, but some other mail automations are not supporting things like WorkMail and ProtonMail, Fastmail, those sort of things, because they require different integration. G Suite is definitely the most supported one, but it also comes with some string attached as well. So people should be a little bit careful. But like I said, this is a very long cast. We're probably going to cover that in a different episode.
I think probably the majority of cold emailers are still using either G Suite or Outlook 365.
Oh, one important point is that it's not that hard to change from one to the other, honestly, guys. Because it's basically just email's address, where the email should be sent, and at the end of the day, you can change inbox from one to the other. The only thing is have to consider the history, but in cold email, that's usually not a problem because once you get the reply, you actually switch to your main domain to carry on the sales conversation.
So I think this question is probably one of the biggest answers that have changed in the past couple of years. I think if we did this cast 2 years ago, it would have been a very simple, just use G Suite and move on.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Right? But today, not so simple. Okay, so now we've purchased a domain, we've set up the SPF, DKIM records, we've redirected the domain, and we've chosen an inbox. What's next?
Oh, one small detail for is if you decide to go for G Suite, your best bet at this stage is to prepay $30. If you don't, and then, even for your start your sort of subscription with them for your inbox, the problem is going to be that you're going to be set on trial for 6 months until you qualified as being not on trial anymore. And that comes with your sender reputation being a bit lower while you're still on trial. So you may want to pay directly $30 with G Suite.
Basically, they keep you on trial until they've billed you for $30.
That's correct.
And you can get around that just by, like you said, just prepaying the 30. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense why paying $30 should promote your sender reputation, but it also lifts the limitations on the daily emails that you can send. And for a reason that I can't really explain, I've found that when you do prepay, you get a fewer spam complaints or just like hassles with Gmail. It's almost a mandatory pay the $30 if you're using Gmail and make your life a little bit easier.
What's next then in your mind, Jack?
Okay, so basically at this point, we've got an inbox that can send emails. Now it's time to talk about warming it up because it's brand new. And whoever you're using to send these emails, they've got their own agenda, and that is to make sure that they're sending good emails. Otherwise, they're going to be known as a spammer, or it'll take down their reputation as a whole. And also, it's a worse user experience if you're using, let's say, Gmail and you happen to get a bunch of spam every day. So what they're trying to do is weed out the bad email senders. And so at this point, it's very important to show your email sender that you're on the up and up. Your messages should get delivered. People generally respond and like receiving your emails, right? So this is why it's so important to warm up a brand new account. It's also why Gmail throttles you at the beginning because they're just not quite sure about you yet. It's early days, and so they're closely monitoring, especially like you said earlier, if you have a .com address. They're paying close attention to what you're doing in the first couple of weeks.
Yes, and it does make sense if you think of percentage. It's super simple. If you send 10 emails and then you got 2 flags as spam, it's already 20% spam. But if you had an inbox that is used regularly and then send thousands of emails, then 2 flags spam is not going to affect a lot percentage-wise.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite important to get into this warming up of the inbox.
Let's go back a couple of years. If this is 2016,
we wouldn't even have a podcast about this.
Yeah, but we would have, if we get in our time machine, we would just say, start slow and make sure you're not having bounces, like that's basically all you would need to worry about for warming up.
That's it. End of the episode.
End of the episode. That's right. There wouldn't even be an episode. But today it's a little different. It's, to me, a little bit more involved, particularly on just the simple fact that spam filters are better today than they were. But we'll get into this in a moment.
One thing I would say, you can't go wrong by starting your warm-up by just sending a few emails manually. Don't use, automation email because it will potentially trigger some stuff like, hey, the first email on this inbox are from an automation software. So try to take it slowly, one step back. Do actually send a few emails manually. And then if you're sending emails, whether it's manually or through automation, make sure that those emails are good emails, they won't bounce, and then people won't flag you as spam. So you have a whole way of doing that. The easiest one is obviously recontact people or won't flag you as spam.
I would say for warming up, probably the latest trend here is Gmail and other big email spam filters are looking at engagement. I've read something where, Gmail has stats on not only who's opening, who's not, but who's replying to whom and do messages get forward, in addition to how many humans click the flag a spam button. So there's a lot of metrics here that go beyond whether or not somebody flags you as spam. And for this reason, I think it's really important that when you warm up an email address, contact, let's say, existing users or colleagues and start to just message people you already know to get a few replies coming in so that you're starting off on the right foot here. Like you send a message, you get a reply, and you do this, several times, a couple dozen times, and your email to reply ratio, your engagement score, if you will, just starts off really healthy. And I think this is going to be a trend that we'll see the rest of this year and beyond to indicate whether or not only a message needs to get delivered, but also if a sender has the reputation that can earn their email to be in the inbox of the recipient.
Yeah, 100%. And on top of that, if you're not quite sure about who you can contact, a gray hat thing is effectively to do the mouse and whisker, but, in a different industry. So it could be, requesting some documentation from some services and stuff like that. So making sure that people will interact with you. That's a quick hack, definitely gray hat, like Jack is having right now.
No, it's a good point. So something to keep in mind in order to keep your engagement score, let's just call it that, healthy throughout your campaign, you can do a couple things. The obvious and utterly important ones are make sure you're sending the right message to the right list. If you're not doing those two things, people are going to get annoyed at your emails. You'll be marked as spam. You won't get replies. You'll be in the sort of Google jailhouse. So do the obvious but important stuff. But also you can have simultaneous campaigns going on where you are, let's say, reaching out to current users, just asking for feedback or just having emails get sent out periodically that are going to get replies. And this is just going to help ensure that your new account will continue to deliver properly.
Yeah, that's definitely a whiter hat than doing the mouse and whisker. But Jack is absolutely right on the fact that the best approach is not to say, oh yeah, that's it, I warmed it up, and then I start like 100% cold email, but effectively to mix and match the campaign are going to be effective, as well as the one that you're less sure that they're going to be effective.
It's true. That's sort of like an alternate use of cold email outreach. Is like a lot of us aren't thinking of using our email automation software to contact people we already know. But this is sort of another tool in your tool belt that you can use to help yourself out.
Yeah, and to redeem myself from giving you a gray hat stuff, a really good one as well is to simply set up the inbound leads, people requesting some documentation and so on, to just automatically fire from this domain that you're trying to warm up. That way you mix things that people are going to engage with because they're asking you, and also the cold email campaign. On top of that, for your cold email campaign, do add variations to your touch. So if someone is monitoring your inbox and see all the emails that goes out, they will see things that goes to the inbounds, things that goes to your clients potentially, and then multiple versions of message that go to cold prospect. That way, it's very difficult to say, oh, that guy is just spamming with the same message. And that's a really good place to be in.
While you're warming up, I'm going to recommend starting slow, but it's not because of the advice we would have given 2 years ago, where it's just good practice to gradually build up to a certain number of sends. I think one of our earlier episodes, we were talking to the CTO of SendGrid, and he sort of laughed at the idea of warming up an email with, let's say, 10 or 15 sends a day, because SendGrid is used to warming up at like 50,000 a day and gradually working up to 50 million. So the idea of warming up an IP is, I think, a little dated. But instead, I think you should start slow for another reason. If you're brand new to cold email and you've got this brand new cold email inbox ready to go, you're probably not going to hit a home run the first campaign. So if you start slow, you'll be able to learn quite a bit without, let's say, burning bridges or sending a terrible campaign to too many people that's going to get your new domain in trouble. So if you start slow, couple dozen throughout the first week, you'll be able to make some pretty significant changes so that the second week you're more comfortable sending to a higher volume, and you're just going to send a better message that's less likely to get flagged as spam.
Yeah, absolutely love it. And to just come back to your IP and sender reputation that you're mentioning, sure, SendGrid's got, lots of thousands of emails to sort of like warm up an IP. But if we're using, for example, G Suite, they have their own IP that they're warming up. So the real warming up that we are doing here when we're using G Suite, for example, is regarding how Google consider us as a sender.
Right.
Remember, we got like 2,000 emails anyway at the maximum. So even for proper blacklist may not consider us as spam given the IP that we're sending because they're basically Google IP. Google do look at how we're sending stuff in order to figure out like, hey, I want to protect my own IP, so I'm not going to let you send more stuff. And therefore they have their own sort of sender reputation for you. And that's valid for any service that you're using that is using shared IP. So one trick to that is effectively going to a service and buy your own sort of IP. That's kind of a more advanced setup. That is, you could effectively get Google or Outlook or Fastmail or whatever, and then use a different service to send things.
Yeah,
like,
SendGrid.
for example, SendGrid, Mailgun, whatever. And SendGrid actually has the ability to have dedicated IP, so you can buy your own IP for $100 a month, I think. And that way that you can monitor your own sender reputation. And that's pretty much how you do it. But that's too technical. You don't need that at this stage, but that's kind of like advanced stuff.
If you determine that cold email is your primary growth engine and, making good strides with it, then look at dedicated IP. But for the sake of getting up and running and making it, an impact with your first campaign.
Yeah, that's not necessary.
Not necessary, but definitely good to know. Okay, so let's change gears slightly. So let's say we're warming up our new inbox, we're getting some replies in. What are some things that we can stay on top of to make sure that we stay in the inbox and out of the spam folder?
Yeah, I'd say really honestly what you briefly said, I think summary it very well, is your list and what you're sending to this list. So make sure they're super targeted and also that they've been cleaned so they won't bounce. You could use something like Never Bounce, Bright Verify, you name it. There is lots of service that will tell you in advance, is that going to bounce or not? And you kind of have to use them to make sure that the first email you send should not be bounces for sure.
If you're serious about cold email, there's no excuse for sending to risky emails or not even verifying in the first place. It's too easy and too important.
Yeah, that's correct.
So our list is verified. You mentioned make sure that you're sending to the right prospect and your message is sort of dialed in so that it's a delight to their day instead of a nuisance.
One more thing I would do is, if you can do it with your software, I'm only talking about QuickMail because I know I can, but increase the time between the emails you're sending at the very beginning. It's super important. So right now in QuickMail specifically, it's 30 seconds between email. It's kind of aggressive. I would definitely go for 5 minutes between emails. So have a very slow pace between emails. And definitely avoid as well personal emails like @gmail.com, @yahoo.com. Well, you should never send an email to @yahoo.com anyway. Let's be clear.
For other reasons.
Otherwise, yeah, for other reasons, like you want to make business, not talk to friends. But anyway, try to avoid the sort of like personal emails. I think they usually cause problem. And it's the same thing for group emails like sales ads. I keep receiving emails on abuse at something or support at something or jobs at something or,
marketing at, sales at.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, guys, just don't do that.
Yeah.
It's bad practice.
Along the same lines here, talking about extending the time in between emails, I also think you should turn off open tracking in the first message of an early campaign for an inbox, just because there's a little thing called the text to image ratio. You turn on image tracking, and basically it's going to add a little pixel. So you don't want images in your first message for a couple of reasons, but to keep it simple, just disable tracking. And if you want to, you can turn it on for the second message, the first follow-up cold email, if you will.
Yeah, that's a fantastic one. Actually, I wouldn't do that at the very beginning when I know it's a little bit scary. It's like, am I really getting delivered kind of thing? But like Jack said, you can do it with future touches. So your first initial sending of emails should actually be like super clean. That also means no link tracking because link tracking always change the actual address you're going to. So remove all of that, no links, no image, no nothing, like, as clean as possible. That will get you better deliverability. It's annoying because not looking actually give you better stats than actually looking at the stats. So yeah, I know it's one of those annoying things.
And the marketer in me is freaked out about not having any metrics on the first email that goes out to all your prospects. I get it. But if you told me that I'd get 10% more replies by turning it off, I care more about getting more replies than finding out what that number is.
So if you're using a software, make sure that you can disable the open tracking for the first one touch or second touch email. And also make sure that every reply is counted as an open. Because some people have
right.
images turned off but they do reply to you, which means technically they opened it. So make sure your software also take this into account. That way you're going to have a better visibility on the open rate, even for people may actually reply on a first touch that has no open tracking in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So your open rate isn't going to be an honest figure. Like it's a little bit off just because, like you said, not everybody is letting in this pixel. So it's basically an estimate. And you're just, with every reply, if you make sure it's counted as an open, just helps that number become a little bit more accurate.
That's right.
I got one more note here to close off the episode. And it's mostly just a mentality for those of us starting out in cold email, warming up this new inbox ready to send to prospects, ready to get some, leads coming in. And I want you to think about how, let's go back to 2014. Do you remember there was this funny concept? It was called like link farms or link pyramids. Basically, you could set up a whole bunch of Web 2.0 sites, like create a bunch of WordPress sites and have them all link back together. And this would show Google that there's a lot of importance going around this topic, and it would elevate that page to the top of the search rankings. Google has since done away with this for many years, but I find a lot of parallels with cold email and SEO, especially today. When I read that Google was taking into account the engagement with emails in deciding whether or not to push that email to the inbox or spam folder, there's some parallels here. But at the end of the day, it seems more and more that spam filters are making sure that good senders that usually send engaging emails, people want to open their emails, people typically reply to their emails. This is, I think, the new metric on what should get delivered and what is spam. If you send 1,000 messages and one person replies to it, something off is going on here. At the end of the day, we need to think a little bit like content marketers, where it just has to be good stuff. If you want your article to be at the top of the search rankings, you need to have something worth sharing. And with cold email, you need to send a cold email that delights your prospects in order to give yourself the best chance of inboxing.
That's absolutely right. It's no excuse. All we've been saying is to give you the opportunity to send a good cold email. But if you send like a rubbish one, then everything we said, just going to have to be redone anyway. So
exactly,
make yourself a favor and make sure that the people you contact are really going to benefit. It's 4 years ago, you could just, blast everyone and it doesn't matter anymore. But today is like too risky of a strategy. I don't think it would lead you anywhere.
And if you're serious about making money with cold email, you need to make the prospect's day when you reach out to them. You need to write an email that's so intriguing that they have to stop what they're doing and get back to you if you really want a successful campaign. So happy emailing, especially to those of you who are new to the game. Follow some of these bullet points, get your new inbox warmed up, and get some replies coming in.
Yeah, I'll send some emails to Jack.
All right. Great cast, Jeremy.
Great cast, Jack. Here's a quick recap of all the steps to properly warm up your cold email domain. 1. Buy your domain, of course. 2. Decide what email provider you want to use and prepay $30 to Google if you go with G Suite. 3. Set up your SPF and DKIM on this domain. 4. Send a few manual messages first to people you know. 5. Make sure you clean your list through some email verification software. Remove all the personal emails such as @gmail.com, @outlook.com, @hotmail.com, and all the group emails such as info@, sales@, marketing@, and so on. 6. Figure out a way to combine cold email with warm emails like existing clients, inbound leads, or even mouse and whisker. 7. Send plain messages initially with no tracking, no open, no click tracking. 8. Add variation to your messages and increase time between emails.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.